And I felt good. People were probably doubting me now. Can I run 10:49 again? And I do believe that I can.
She was the fastest woman the world had ever seen. Then she died suddenly at just 38. The official report blamed a rare brain condition. But hidden inside that same autopsy were shocking details. An enlarged heart, oversized organs, and no harmful substances in her system. She never failed a test, but was something missed? Did her body hold the truth no one wanted to face? From record-breaking speed to silent suspicion. This is the story of Florence Griffith Joyner and the disturbing clues her autopsy left behind. Let's discover the rise of Flo-Jo, speed, style, and suspicion. She ran like lightning, faster than any woman had ever run before. She wore 6-inch nails, a one-legged tracksuit, and left every competitor in her dust. In just 10 seconds, Florence Griffith Joyner turned herself into an American icon and a global enigma. But behind the flash, behind the records, there was something else. Something that didn't add up. How did she go from silver in 1984 to smashing world records by margins never seen before? Why did her body change so dramatically in such a short time? And what disturbing secrets did her autopsy finally reveal? Florence Dolores Griffith was born in Los Angeles in 1959, the 7th of 11 children. Raised in the Jordan Downs housing projects of Watts, she discovered her speed early, chasing jackrabbits through the fields. That raw talent led her to the University of California, Los Angeles, where she ran track and studied psychology. By the time the 1984 Summer Olympics came around, hosted in her hometown of Los Angeles, Flo-Jo had already made a name for herself in the sprinting world. She won the silver medal in the 200-meter race, finishing just behind American teammate Valerie Briscoe Hooks. It was a proud moment, but also one that left her unsatisfied. After those games, she stepped back from the sport. Officially, she took time off to focus on her family and fashion interests. Unofficially, many believe she used the break to completely overhaul her body. When she returned to professional athletics in 1987, the transformation was hard to miss. Her times were faster, her muscle mass had dramatically increased. And she wasn't just winning races, she was obliterating the competition. At the 1988 U.S. Olympic trials, she ran the 100-meter dash in 10.49 seconds, a world record that, incredibly, still stands to this day. The wind gauge, which measures if the runner had any assistance from the breeze, read 0. But many experts believed the machine was faulty and that the wind was too strong for the time to be legal. Still, the number held. In the Seoul Olympics that followed, she won 3 gold medals and 1 silver, making her the undisputed queen of sprinting. But not everyone was celebrating. Almost as quickly as the headlines praised her speed and style, whispers began. People started asking, how is this possible? How can a 100-meter record drop by this much, this fast, after decades of gradual progress? And how did her physique change so dramatically in such a short time? Her appearance had become a spectacle in itself. Her signature one-legged leotards, brightly colored with bold geometric designs, were as talked about as her races. Her nails were so long that she reportedly needed help zipping her uniform. She wore jewelry on the track. She smiled wide, posed like a supermodel, and moved like a bullet. She wasn't just an athlete, she was a brand. But in the cutthroat world of elite sports, especially for women, becoming a spectacle often comes at a price. The same features that made her beloved by fans, her physique, her dominance, her sense of style, also made her a target. People started speculating about performance-enhancing substances. Fellow athletes murmured about human growth hormone, or HGH, a powerful substance that was not banned at the time and couldn't be tested for. Even after she passed every substance screening given to her, the accusations didn't stop. Instead, they became more conspiratorial. Maybe she was using something new, something science couldn't detect. Maybe her transformation wasn't just hard work. She had become a symbol of American dominance in women's sports. But behind the glory, there was discomfort. Athletes whispered, journalists questioned, coaches speculated. and Flo-Jo kept smiling, running, and winning. But what no one could have imagined was how suddenly it would all end. In 1998, at just 38 years old, Florence Griffith Joyner died in her sleep. The world was stunned. And when the autopsy report was released, the public expected closure. Instead, it sparked even more disturbing questions. The autopsy reveals seizure, suffocation, and something else? What the doctors found in Florence Griffith Joyner's autopsy was deeply unsettling. Some say it was the missing puzzle piece. Others say it raised more questions than it answered. For decades, her legacy teetered between greatness and suspicion. But when the full autopsy report became public, it revealed not only how she died, but how disturbingly different her body was. A woman who had stunned the world with her speed was now the subject of a quiet medical bombshell. Why was her heart so large? Why were several of her organs abnormally developed? And could these signs point to something more? Something she carried in secret? Florence Griffith Joyner died in her sleep on the morning of September 21, 1998. She was just 38 years old. There were no warnings, no long illnesses, no reports of declining health. Her sudden death sent shockwaves across the world. For an Olympic champion, a mother, a seemingly unstoppable force of life, to simply not wake up, it felt impossible. But when the Orange County Coroner's Office performed her autopsy, the medical explanation was clear, at least on the surface. The official cause of death: asphyxiation due to a seizure, which itself was caused by a rare congenital brain defect called cavernous angioma. This condition affects the blood vessels in the brain. In a healthy brain, blood flows cleanly through vessels to supply oxygen. But in people with cavernous angiomas, the vessels are malformed and weak. Instead of flowing smoothly, blood pools into small clumps or caverns, hence the name. These pooled areas can trigger seizures, hemorrhages, and in severe cases, death by asphyxiation if the seizure restricts breathing. This explained why Florence died suddenly, but it didn't explain everything. Because when doctors examined her internal organs, they found something that couldn't be ignored. Her heart was enlarged, not slightly but significantly. And it wasn't just the heart. Several of her organs were larger than average. In medical terms, this condition is called organomegaly, a generic term for the abnormal enlargement of internal organs. While some enlargement can occur in elite athletes due to intense cardiovascular training, there are limits, and Flo-Jo's case exceeded those limits. So what causes an athlete, especially a sprinter whose sport doesn't involve the kind of endurance that typically stretches heart muscle, to develop such drastic organ changes? That's where the story turns. One of the leading medical explanations for organ enlargement, especially in the heart, hands, feet, and facial bones, is a disorder called acromegaly. Acromegaly is caused by an overload of growth hormone in the body, specifically human growth hormone, HGH. In a natural setting, this hormone is produced by the pituitary gland and regulates growth, cell reproduction, and regeneration. But when someone takes synthetic HGH in large doses over a long period, it can throw the body into chaos. The signs of HGH abuse can be subtle. Over time, the body swells, muscles get fuller, skin thickens, joints expand, organs grow. In extreme cases, the heart becomes so large and overworked that it loses efficiency, and that's when tragedy can strike. In Florence's case, no traces of HGH were found in her blood at the time of death. But this doesn't rule out the possibility of long-term use. Synthetic HGH is notoriously difficult to detect, especially in the late 80s and 90s, when testing methods were primitive. Even today, many forms of HGH use can go undetected unless blood is drawn within hours of injection. So, could Florence Griffith Joyner's enlarged heart and oversized organs be the long-term residue of HGH use? The medical community is divided. Some argue that her physique and organ growth could have been natural outcomes of high-performance training and genetics. Others say the pattern aligns too closely with HGH abuse to ignore. Let's step back for a moment. Remember, HGH was not banned by the International Olympic Committee until 1989. and there was no test for it until years later. In other words, even if an athlete had used it before that time, there would have been no way to prove it, and no rule was technically broken. This leaves a massive gray area in sports history, one that Florence's autopsy helped bring into the spotlight. But what about the other substances in her body? Toxicology reports showed no illegal substances, no narcotics, no alcohol. The only substances present were acetaminophen, a common painkiller, and diphenhydramine, an antihistamine best known by its brand name, Benadryl. These are standard over-the-counter medications. Neither was found in a quantity high enough to contribute to her death. This makes the enlarged organs even more curious. If there were no substances in her system and no signs of foul play, then what explains the internal changes? Could it truly be natural? Or was it the final fingerprint of a pharmaceutical past, one that no longer left chemical traces, but left physical ones behind? One of the most debated points is whether her cavernous angioma, the brain condition that ultimately caused her seizure, could have been connected in any way to HGH or PED use. To date, no scientific study has linked HGH use to the development of cavernous angiomas. These are generally believed to be genetic and not caused by external substances. And yet, suspicion lingers because the narrative doesn't sit comfortably. An Olympic legend dies suddenly. The autopsy confirms a rare, silent brain condition, and then, quietly, notes that her heart and organs were significantly enlarged. No substances found, no evidence of cheating, but no certainty either. Section 3. Unfinished business, HGH, accusations, and the testing gap. In 1988, just days after Florence Griffith Joyner left the Seoul Olympics with 3 gold medals and 1 silver, a shadow began to creep across her shining legacy. That year, fellow American sprinter Darryl Robinson stepped forward with a claim that shocked the world of athletics. He said he had supplied Flo-Jo with human growth hormone, also known as HGH. He didn't say he heard it from someone else. He said he did it himself. He bought it, he delivered it, and it was at her request. The allegation was made during a paid interview, and Joyner immediately denied it. She dismissed it as false and defamatory. Her defenders pointed out that Robinson had a history of making similar accusations about other high-profile athletes, often without proof, and had been criticized for seeking attention through sensational claims. But the damage had already been done. The timing of his statements, so soon after Flo-Jo's historic Olympic performance, gave oxygen to a fire that had been quietly smoldering for months. What made these claims especially difficult to assess was the context of the time. In 1988, HGH was not banned by the International Olympic Committee. More importantly, there was no available test for HGH. Even if an athlete had taken it, and even if they had done so the night before a race, it would have gone completely undetected by substance tests of that era. The testing gap was enormous. Substance enforcement in the 1980s was decades behind the pharmacology athletes had access to. Steroids could be detected in urine samples, but substances like HGH, insulin, and various peptide hormones slipped right through the system. There were no blood tests for HGH. There were no biological passports tracking long-term changes in an athlete's body. You could train in public, inject in private, and win gold with no paper trail. That's why Robinson's accusation hit so hard. It was unverifiable, but not implausible. And for critics who were already skeptical of Joyner's stunning transformation between 1984 and 1988, it felt like confirmation of what they already believed. But was it proof? Not even close. Flo-Jo passed every single substance test she was subjected to. Not once did she test positive for any banned substance. But here's the problem. In the eyes of the public, passing a test doesn't always equal innocence, especially when the tests themselves are widely known to be incomplete. It's like locking your front door while leaving the windows wide open and then declaring the house secure. At the exact same Olympics where Florence made history, another sprinting superstar, Canadian runner Ben Johnson, was stripped of his gold medal in the 100-meter dash after testing positive for stanozolol, an anabolic steroid. The fallout was massive. Johnson was vilified, his coach was banned, and a global conversation about doping in sports was launched almost overnight. But Johnson's case also created a strange contrast. He was caught because he used a substance that was already banned and easily traceable. Joyner, on the other hand, dominated her events, passed all her tests, and yet remained under suspicion, not because of what could be proven, but because of what couldn't be ruled out. This raises a disturbing question. How many athletes in that era used performance enhancers that simply couldn't be detected? The real answer is that we don't know, and we probably never will. HGH didn't become a banned substance until the end of 1989, over a year after the Seoul Games. The first effective blood test for HGH wasn't developed until the early 2000s, and even today, it remains one of the most difficult performance-enhancing substances to detect with consistency. That historical blind spot casts a long shadow over athletes from the 80s and 90s. Many of their records still stand. Many of their bodies were never scrutinized in the way they would be today. And many of their secrets, if there were any, went to the grave with them. But what makes Joyner's case so unique is the intensity of the scrutiny she received despite her passing every test. Why her? Why not others? Some say it was because she was too good. Others point to her visible physical transformation, her muscular build, and her dominance in both short and mid-distance sprints. There's no doubt that Flo-Jo looked different than her peers, stronger, leaner, more powerful. But some argue that this difference became a kind of visual evidence for those determined to believe she was cheating. Then there's another angle. Joyner wasn't just an athlete, she was a public figure. Her fame extended beyond sports into pop culture. She appeared on magazine covers, released fitness videos, and dabbled in fashion design. The higher her profile rose, the more the media latched onto the possibility of scandal. In a way, the very things that made her beloved also made her a target. There's also the issue of gender and race. Male athletes, even those with dramatic performance jumps, often escape the level of speculation that haunted Flo-Jo. And black women, especially those who defied conventional norms of beauty and femininity, have historically been subject to over-policing of their bodies, both in and out of sports. Was Florence Griffith Joyner judged more harshly because of how she looked? Because of how she didn't conform? Because she didn't fit the mold of what an Olympic champion was supposed to be? And so we come back to that uneasy space between facts and suspicions. Florence never failed a substance test. There is no conclusive evidence she used HGH. But her story sits in a historical window when the rules were changing, when the science was lacking, and when the line between natural and enhanced performance was growing blurrier by the day. Death, doubt, and legacy, the ghost that still lingers. When Florence Griffith Joyner died in her sleep at just 38 years old, the sports world was devastated. But some weren't shocked. For critics who had long questioned how she achieved such superhuman speeds, her sudden death felt like a confirmation. No autopsy report, no clean toxicology result, and no congenital brain condition could fully erase the cloud of suspicion that had been building over her career. Was this truly a natural death? Or was something deliberately left out of the report? Could a champion with a clean record still carry a buried secret to her grave? The official report was clear. She died of asphyxiation caused by a seizure. That seizure, in turn, was the result of a rare congenital condition called cavernous angioma. It's a brain defect present from birth, often asymptomatic, where clusters of blood vessels form abnormally and sometimes leak or swell. These clusters can trigger headaches, seizures, or even strokes. In Flo-Jo's case, it triggered a seizure so severe it caused her to stop breathing in the middle of the night. To most medical professionals, this was an unfortunate but straightforward case. No illegal substances were found in her body. No alcohol, no banned performance enhancers. Just trace amounts of over-the-counter medications, acetaminophen and Benadryl. There was no immediate red flag. The cause of death was declared, The investigation was closed, and the official narrative was set. But the public didn't let it rest. Within days of the report being released, whispers started circulating online and in the media. Was the autopsy too clean? Was it rushed? Was the coroner pressured to preserve a legend's reputation? What about the heart? Why was it so large? That detail, buried in the middle of the coroner's report, quickly became the centerpiece of a new wave of speculation. Her heart, they said, was abnormally enlarged. Not slightly, significantly. The condition was labeled as cardiomegaly, which can happen for a few different reasons. It can be caused by chronic high blood pressure. It can develop in response to intense cardiovascular training, which is common in elite athletes. But it can also result from prolonged exposure to human growth hormone. And in the eyes of many, this one sentence about an oversized heart confirmed everything they had suspected, but never proven. Here's the issue. The presence of an enlarged heart doesn't automatically mean substance use. The human heart is a muscle, and like all muscles, it can adapt and grow when placed under consistent physical stress. Long-distance runners, cyclists, swimmers, all have been known to develop thicker heart walls and increased heart mass as a result of years of endurance training. But Flo-Jo wasn't an endurance athlete. She was a sprinter. Her races lasted 10 to 22 seconds. Her sport required explosive power, not extended strain. Which raises the question, why would her heart look like someone who had trained for marathons? Some experts argue that this discrepancy could be genetic or the result of undiagnosed hypertension. Others say the nature of her training, high-intensity intervals, repeated bursts of exertion, could, over time, stress the heart in a similar way. But others aren't convinced. They look at the enlarged organs, the sudden death, the explosive career spike, and they connect the dots. For them, the heart wasn't just enlarged, it was symbolic. Proof of what had always been hidden in plain sight. This is the dilemma at the center of Flo-Jo's legacy: medical ambiguity and cultural certainty. The science offers multiple possible explanations. But public opinion often doesn't care about nuance. People want closure. They want clear answers. And when they can't find them, they create their own. For some fans, Joyner's death didn't raise new questions. It just reinforced old suspicions. It became the ultimate "I told you so." They pointed to her sudden rise in performance, her physical transformation, her refusal to slow down, and said, "See, no one moves that fast without consequences." Never mind that she had passed every substance test. Never mind that HGH wasn't even banned during the time she was competing. The suspicion had already written itself into the story, and her death was treated as the final, silent admission. Even today, that suspicion hasn't gone away. You'll still see comment sections under highlight reels filled with the same doubts. You'll hear podcasts revisiting her autopsy, drawing the same lines between HGH and acromegaly, between organ size and deception. Her brilliance, to many, is always followed by an asterisk. A new chapter: Tiffany Haddish, the biopic, and a legacy under revision. More than 2 decades after her sudden death, Florence Griffith Joyner's story is being told again, but this time, not on the track or in the headlines. It's happening on screen. Comedian and actress Tiffany Haddish is set to portray Flo-Jo in an upcoming biopic, a move that has sparked renewed conversation around one of the most controversial and celebrated athletes in Olympic history. But why now? Why is the world suddenly interested in revisiting the life of a woman so often defined by suspicion rather than celebration? The answer may lie in the way culture has shifted. In recent years, there's been a growing effort to re-examine the stories of powerful women who were misunderstood or misrepresented by the media during their lifetimes. From Monica Lewinsky to Britney Spears to Janet Jackson, there's a widespread reckoning with the narratives that were built around these women and the social forces that shaped them. Flo-Jo fits squarely into this trend. She was beautiful, unapologetically feminine, and dominant in a male-dominated arena. And like so many other women, her success came with a price: relentless scrutiny. The upcoming biopic, which Tiffany Haddish has called a passion project, presents an opportunity to explore the complexity of Florence's life in ways the media never allowed during her career. Rather than focusing solely on accusations and records, the film can show her as a full person, a mother, a wife, a designer, and a competitor. It can show the weight of being extraordinary in a system that treats excellence with suspicion, especially when it comes from a black woman who refused to tone herself down for anyone's comfort. Haddish, who grew up idolizing Flo-Jo, has spoken openly about what the role means to her. For her, this isn't just a portrayal, it's a reparation, a chance to bring light to a story long overshadowed by controversy. And for many viewers, especially younger generations who know Joyner only by her stats or scandals, the film could be an introduction to the woman behind the world records. It also comes at a moment when society is asking harder questions about how gender, race, and media bias shape public perception. Florence Griffith Joyner was not just fast, she was powerful. And in the eyes of many, she was too powerful. Her muscles were examined, her femininity questioned, and her confidence treated as arrogance. The criticism she faced went far beyond performance. It targeted her identity. Throughout her career, there was an intense fixation on her appearance. Reporters commented on her body in ways they never would have with a male athlete. She was too muscular, they said. Her jaw looked too sharp. Her physique wasn't natural. Even as she dazzled audiences with her speed, headlines speculated about whether her femininity was real, whether she was woman enough. It wasn't just about how she ran, it was about how she looked doing it. Compare this to her male contemporaries. Carl Lewis, for example, also dominated the sprints in the same Olympic cycles. He too had an elite physique, rapid performance improvement, and unmatched results. But he wasn't subjected to the same kind of forensic obsession over his body. The scrutiny wasn't as personal. His muscles weren't treated as evidence. His victories weren't clouded with the same level of doubt. That difference is not accidental. It's structural. It's part of a larger pattern in which female athletes, especially black women, face hypersurveillance of their bodies. In this context, hypersurveillance means that their physical features are constantly monitored, dissected, and judged, not just for performance, but for how well they conform to mainstream standards of femininity and acceptability. Flo-Jo wore 6-inch nails and ran in custom-designed one-legged leotards. She combined speed with glamour, grace with power. But what should have been embraced as radical self-expression was often mocked or treated as proof that something wasn't right. Her fashion was called excessive. Her nails were labeled a distraction. Her image was politicized. Her beauty, her power, her visibility, all treated as if they couldn't coexist without something artificial holding them together. And this wasn't a coincidence. It reflected deeper biases about who is allowed to succeed without suspicion. When white athletes dominate, they're often framed as prodigies. When men show aggression or ambition, they're praised for their competitive drive. But when Florence won, when she looked flawless and ran impossibly fast, she was called suspicious, she was called fake. These double standards are exactly what the biopic has a chance to challenge. By centering her story in her own voice, through her perspective, it can help shift the narrative. It can show the pressures she faced behind the scenes, the choices she made to own her image, and the emotional cost of being celebrated and doubted in the same breath. The film could portray how surviving the scrutiny was, in itself, a kind of performance. It also opens the door for a more nuanced conversation about her death. The medical cause, cavernous angioma, is now better understood. Today, CT scans and MRIs are common diagnostic tools that might have detected the condition early, long before it triggered the seizure that killed her. If it had been found and treated, her death might have been preventable. And maybe, with clearer medical records, the conspiracy theories that followed might never have taken root. Instead, those gaps in medical knowledge and the public's eagerness to fill them with suspicion left a permanent mark on her legacy. For years, people have pointed to the enlarged heart noted in her autopsy as coded proof of doping. But now, with more awareness of congenital heart conditions, and better understanding of how elite athletes' bodies can adapt and evolve, we can ask smarter questions, and we can also ask, why weren't those questions asked for other athletes? Why was it Florence who bore the burden of proof? The answers lie in a culture that often demands perfection from women, but punishes them when they deliver it on their own terms. Florence Griffith Joyner didn't fit into any of the boxes the public had prepared. She wasn't docile, she wasn't subtle, and she wasn't interested in explaining herself. She defined herself. That alone was threatening. So when the biopic hits screens, it won't just be a recap of her Olympic career. It will be a correction, a chance to reconsider how we've talked about women in sports, how we've framed their ambition, and how we've weaponized their bodies against them. And perhaps most importantly, it will be a reminder that Florence wasn't just running for medals. She was running through the limits that had been placed around women like her for decades. And this time, maybe the world will finally catch up. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Click the next video for more exciting content.